Hey, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Now would be a good time to go ahead and like this video. It helps with the algorithm. Recently, I did a video on an Ealing Studios classic comedy, The Lavender Hill Mob. And quite frankly, it hasn't gotten a lot of views. So it's been so disappointing that I've decided to go ahead and do another video on a different Ealing Studios classic comedy, The LadyKillers. Now this one is a very subtle British dark comedy, and to me it's quite awesome. I saw it a long time ago. I think I bought a VHS copy of it. I looked around for it. I must have somehow gotten rid of it at some point, unfortunately. But so I did see it on a SD quality. Now this is a new 4K version. It is put out by Studio Canal. There is a Kino Lorber announced disc coming out soon. Now Kino Lorber does a good job. They recently did one on The Heat of the Night and High Noon. A lot of times they will use the Studio Canal transfers. This is a UK release, but it is 4K, so it will play in a Type A player, the US players. The Blu-ray disc in here, there's a Blu-ray version. It won't play in a Region A player. You have to get a Region Free or a Region B player. A quick rundown of the plot here. So there are four criminals, like small-time criminals. They're going to pull a heist. They have to rent this room in this older lady's house. Her name is Mrs. Wilberforce. And they have to rent a room in her house in order to pull off the heist. After they pull the heist off, she figures out they are the criminals from the heist, and so she wants them to turn themselves in. But instead of getting scared by finding out they are the criminals, she becomes very defiant and tries to almost scold them and wants to turn them in, and wants them to turn themselves in. So after that, it turns out that they decide they need to kill her, and it kind of spirals out of control from there. So the cast in this is amazing. It stars Alec Guinness, who also starred in the Lavender Hill Mob. Here he plays the gang leader, or the group leader, and he is Professor Marcus. But this character he plays here seems to be borderline insane. And the further it gets into the movie, when things start to go bad, he seems to be more and more crazy until when it gets to the very end. It's the other gang members. Peter Sellers plays one of the other guys, Mr. Robinson. He's very intimidated by the older lady who runs the house. Peter Sellers, if you don't know who he is, he played Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther movies, and he's really hilarious in this part. He's also very good in this one. This was his breakthrough role. He's very young in this compared to later on, obviously. But Herbert Lom is one of the other criminals. He plays Mr. Harvey, who's a very mysterious type of character. He's the last one of the four to show up at the house. He also co-starred in the Pink Panther movies. He was Chief Inspector Dreyfus, and he's quite hilarious in them. In this movie, he plays it very straight. He kind of plays it straight in Pink Panther movies, but eventually becomes more comedy when he. But here he plays it very straight, and he's a very serious character. And he doesn't want it to have anything to do with this older lady. He doesn't want her involved in the crime whatsoever. He thinks it's a bad idea. But later on, when they decide that they have to kill her, he's the most reluctant of them to get involved with that part of the aspect. Danny Green plays he's a very big guy who it seems to have more heart than any of the other guys, but he's not very smart. Now, of all the cast members, I think the most impressive is Katie Johnson, who plays the older lady, Mrs. Wilberforce, and she is a force to be reckoned with. Now, this movie was one of her last movies, and it was really her almost like a breakthrough role in a way, because this is her biggest part, and she is amazing in it, playing this character. Now, there is a remake of this movie by the Coen brothers. It stars Tom Hanks and Irma P. Hall as Mrs. Wilberforce. This movie doesn't do the subtle humor very well. It goes very broad with it, and it doesn't work as well. It's been a long time since I've seen this one, but I remember watching it, and and thinking that it was too much, that it wasn't nearly as good as the original one, and they went way too broad with it. The same plot stuff happens here in the movie for the most part, but it doesn't quite work as well, though the cast is very solid. I usually like Coen Brothers movies, but sometimes if I rewatch a Coen Brothers movie, I find that I like it more than I did the first time. So as far as the transfer here, this movie was shot in Technicolor, which was an interesting way of going, but it has a very gothic sensibilities. It almost has a film noirish type of approach. It was one of the first movies by the Ealing Studios shot in color, and is one of the last of the original Ealing Studios comedies. And it's probably the most famous of them all. But the film, it does have that kind of film noir, shadowy type of approach to it, and it's a very interesting contradiction between Technicolor and that type of aspect. And a lot of the movie takes place inside of the house, but there's also scenes that take place out in the street, and when they do the heist, it's not there, so you don't feel like it's a play in a house, but a lot of the movie does take place in the house. This film is presented in 2 aspect ratios. It was originally shot in 1:37:1, which you're going to see like the bars on the side, probably about this much, which is kind of weird to see that. Now the other aspect ratio is 1:66:1, which is going to put it about most of your screen. Now, I watched it in 1:66:1 thinking that was the way to go, but that's not the way it was shot originally. And they actually, in order to achieve this, they had to zoom in, they had to crop it in and zoom in on the picture, and you lose some information on the top and the bottom of the frame. And it doesn't look as good as far as the deletion and the sharpness of everything, because you're losing some information as it's having to be zoomed in. Now, I didn't realize this. I watched it in 1:66:1, but then later on I read about it, and I found out the better way to watch it is in the kind of this type of version. Now, I'm going to show you I took a few shots of the TV, and you can see the difference. On the left, you see the original one. You just look at the top where you see the police thing. You can actually read the word police on it. Here's another option here where you can see where it was just cropped in above Alec Guinness's head. So as I said before, Kino Lorber is going to put out a release of this in the near future. So if you don't have this Studio Canal version, that's going to be the way to go to see it in 4K. I'm going to stick with this one because it's the one I got in my hand right now. I also ordered another Studio Canal Ealing classic comedy, Kind Hearts and Coronets, which also has Alec Guinness in it. And if this video does really poorly, if I get like 20 views on it or something like that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a video on Kind of Hearts and Coronets just to do it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Dave Watkins. If you haven't done so already, if you'd like this video, and subscribe.